Now, around this time each week, we look at something or someone who we think could justifiably be known as the pride of Merseyside. But earlier this month was the anniversary of the tragic events that led to an episode in the history of Liverpool that's far from glorious. The RMS Lusitania was sunk by a torpedo from a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland on the afternoon of the 7th of May 1915. It provoked days and nights of rioting in Liverpool, Bootle and Birkenhead. Businesses owned by anyone with a name that sounded remotely German were attacked, and now those events featured in one chapter of a new book of short stories entitled America Awaits Us, My Lovely, and Other Stories. It's been written by Christopher Owen, a former actor of repute turned successful writer, and he's been telling me all about his dad's links to Liverpool.
My dad lived as a boy, first of all, at 53 Bedford Road in Bootle.
Right.
And then they moved to Wadham Road, 124 Road. And his family originally came from Carnarvon, but they were merchant seamen and they wanted to be near the docks for when the husbands and sons came back from their long, long journeys at sea. And he was, my grandfather's a master mariner on the White Star ships. And he was in the war. They took over the merchant ships to join the Royal Navy. You know what I mean? And he was captain of this converted White Star merchant ship, which was helping to bring food and mail. Now, unfortunately, it was a very tough time, as you can imagine, for them. And soon after getting back from sea, he died of pneumonia. And my dad, at the age of 16, he was born, by the way, in 1900, he became the sole breadwinner of the family.
God.
And actually, things were pretty tight. And there's a story I'd like to tell you, very brief. They had cake on Sundays. That was a big deal. And they said that the cake was cut in such thin slices, Sean, they could read the Liverpool Echo through them. Yeah. Unfortunately, my dad was pretty clever, and he joined the local tax office in Liverpool. They stayed there. I was in Liverpool Playhouse. They stayed there until the house was bombed in Second World War, and then they went to Cambridge Avenue, which is in Waterloo, isn't it? Waterloo, Crosby, indeed, and then they got a place in Ince Avenue, and it was Ince Avenue in the 60s. I visited them. I was at the Liverpool Playhouse at the time.
Yeah.
So they were there a long, long time.
God. So you were at the Playhouse in Rep as a young actor, weren't you?
Well, that's it. I was at Liverpool Playhouse, and I'll tell you who else was there. I'll tell you who else was there. Rita Tashingham.
Wow.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Does that mean anything?
Yes. Taste of Honey, fantastic.
Sure. Well, you see, there was this young girl. Well, she was little more than a girl. She was very young and very bright and jolly and fun. And called Rita Tashingham. She was sweeping the stage at the time. And she said to the director, look, can I have the afternoon off? I've got to go to Manchester for this audition for this film. And he said, okay. And she came back and she said, I've got it. And it was A Taste of Honey.
Go away.
And, well, the rest is history.
Anyone else there we'd know?
Yeah. Linda Bellingham.
Yeah? Go on. She was lovely woman.
Well, she was. And she was a leading lady there. You know, she was doing all the big parts, and she was a smasher. And as we know, she died, didn't she?
She did. She was
not long ago. And she was also known for the OXO advert.
She was the OXO woman for years, wasn't she?
She was. And I knew her after all that, too. I used to live up in Huskinson Street, which in 1963, or wherever it was, 62, was a terrible state. I mean, all around there, Catherine Street, Huskinson Street.
It's lovely now.
I believe so.
Yeah,
they've done them up. And made
you must
them
come back and have a look. So tell us about you've been in a number of films yourself, haven't you? In loads of telly.
Well, lots of telly. Yeah. I was, and I did a lot of theatre work, touring Rep. But I was in the BBC House of Cards.
Oh, right.
You know, with Ian Richardson playing the lead. I played a man. I was featured as a man called Peter Mackenzie, who was the Minister of Health, which is a very nice part. And Sharp's Honour. You remember Sharp's Honour with Sean Bean?
Yeah.
And a long time ago, I did Perfect Spy.
God.
And then, of course, I was in things like Men Behaving Badly. I was in the very early ones when Harry Enfield was still doing it.
Away.
And then I was in The Bill, Morse, Poirot, all those, Surgical Spirit. I did a children's series in which I played a very daft headmaster called Bad Boys, B-O-Y-E-S, and that was on the Beeb for a couple of series, and that was really nice because it really got me sort of going there. So, yeah.
So you've turned to writing. So tell us about the new book, and in particular, the story of Ellen, and how it reflects what was happening in this month in 1915.
Well, Sean, the book's full of stories, and there's one called Ellen. And it's set during the riots, as you were mentioning earlier, in Liverpool in 1915 after the sinking of the RMS Lusitania. And the actual story is about these 4 women who are street cleaners because the men were at war. And I saw this wonderful photograph of these, and they're all togged up in their clothes, their overalls and that. And I've got 4 women there, and each woman has her own story. I mean, one's lost her husband on the Lusitania, and the other one's husband can't work because he broke his back after a fall at the Albert Docks. Another one has lost her very young husband on that boat, that ship, and then there's another one who, so forth. And they're fiction, but the actual story is factual in terms of the riots.
I know.
The Lusitania was torpedoed, as you were saying earlier, by Germany. It sunk beneath the waves off the southern coast of Ireland. 1,198 passengers, of which there was about over 400 crew. And many of those crew were Liverpool Irish. And most of those families, of course, were poor. Now, the huge eruption of grief and anger. And the riots lasted 3 days.
God.
And they came from all over the place, from the dock, up from Bank Hall Slope, Miller's Bridge, Sand Hills. And these men, women, and children, they were armed with sticks and everything. And they burnt the houses and shops of anyone they suspected of being German. So there were a whole lot of German pork butchers there, and they were part of the community. Everybody accepted them. They've been there years and years, but because of this anger, because it happens all over the country, it happened in Liverpool, they burnt their places down.
God.
And my uncle Ivor wrote of when he was a boy in Bootle. They were between Beatrice and Benedict Streets. There was a pork butcher and his family who used to be called Gullman, which is German, and then of course they changed, like a lot of Germans did living over here, to an English sort of name, Glover. My dad played football with their son. Their shop was wrecked, set on fire, and they never saw that family again.
Really?
And I mean, there was as Sean, I think, was an estimated 2,000 made for the pork shops along Mill Street, Northumberland. Some of your listeners will know these places. I'm sure a lot of them will.
Sure they will.
Northumberland Street, Windsor Street, North Hill, Upper Hill, all along there, Warwick Street.
Well, it's an intriguing story. Where can we get the book from, Christopher?
Well, it's called America Awaits Us, my lovely, because the title story is about that. And you can get it from it's published by Troubador Publishers. You can get it straight from there, or you can get it from the bookshops, or you can get it online, the usual online retail people.
What a very interesting guy, and stories to tell. I'll tell you, Christopher Owen. The book is called America Awaits Us, my lovely, and other stories. It's out now. Check it out. Very interesting. And interesting to read about the aftermath of what happened after the Lusitania in Liverpool.